Ahsoka Tano has become one of the most iconic Star Wars characters of all time, and when news of her appearance on The Mandalorian and subsequently her own live-action show hit the interwebs, it was met with enormous praise. The mere mention of the character in any Star Wars media now sparks major feelings within Star Wars lovers across the globe, but it wasn't always that way. Actually, when Ahsoka debuted in 2008, people didn't really like her all that much. So how did an unknown character who at the time didn't make much sense for the overall story become one of the most beloved characters across the entire franchise? What's up, humans? I'm Steven, and this is why we love Ahsoka. Now, although Ahsoka never appeared in the first two Star Wars trilogies, she was very much a creation of George Lucas himself, who felt that Anakin should have a Padawan in an upcoming saga about the Clone Wars. The youngling first appeared in the Clone Wars movie in 2008 and was met with, well, a lot of confusion. Many fans felt it was weird for Anakin to all of a sudden have a Padawan who was never made mention to in Revenge of the Sith. Other fans were turned off by her attitude. She was annoying, headstrong, and extremely sure of herself for someone with no experience. Kinda like two other Star Wars characters when they first debuted. But despite her design being undeniably interesting, most fans just weren't sure how to feel about her, and that uncertainty followed her through the first couple of episodes in the Clone Wars TV show.
Criminals captured. Jedi Master Plo Koon and Padawan Ahsoka Tano successfully thwarted an attempt on Mace Windu's life, killing bounty hunter Aura Singh in the process. Since that time, young Ahsoka has grown strong in the ways of the Force.
Around season 3 is when the show really began to hit its sweet spot with Ahsoka. It was clear how far she had come with her abilities, she was far stronger in the Force, and she began to go on more missions without Anakin or Obi-Wan. Over time, as we watched her grow and evolve under the tutelage of several Jedi Masters, many of us fans began to accept her as our own. Her relationship with the clones mirrored ours as she treated them like brothers, while many of the other Jedi saw them as expendable parts of a greater whole. Over the course of the show, Ahsoka learned many lessons about the war and life in general. Those same lessons that stuck with those of us who felt like we were growing up with the young Padawan. Ahsoka also embodied the best aspects of two of the greatest knights to come through the Jedi Order, her mentors Anakin and Obi-Wan. Her undeniable combat ability and almost limitless potential resembled her master Anakin and was so enjoyable to watch as she wasn't afraid to challenge him. But it was her ability to learn from her mistakes as well as temper her own emotions that made her more similar to Obi-Wan. Okay, but all of these things are obvious as to why we love Ahsoka, so allow me to explore her character a little bit further. When I was growing up, the Jedi were some of the greatest superheroes to ever exist to me. They stood for all that was just and righteous. Oh, how amazing it would be to rise among the ranks with the likes of Master Yoda, Windu, or Qui-Gon, or to wield a lightsaber with the tenacity and skill of Anakin or Luke Skywalker. The Jedi Order for me was the best thing about Star Wars, and I kept those feelings even after seeing Revenge of the Sith. But as I got older and began to rewatch Star Wars with more understanding, the cracks within the Order began to show. How was a Sith Lord able to bamboozle the all-knowing Jedi? If you have no attachments, what makes you prepared to defend the people of the galaxy? What I'm trying to say is, the shiny paint of the Jedi began to wear off the older I got, and in many ways, their downfall seemed totally warranted to me by the time I reached adulthood. Now, if that story sounds familiar to you, I'm willing to bet you were the same way. It also probably sounds familiar to you because that's also the story of Ahsoka. Ahsoka Tano was ready for field training at the start of the Clone Wars, which means she spent the first part of her Jedi years during peacetime. She grew up under the doctrine of the Jedi being the most powerful peacekeepers in the galaxy. But in her teen years, the most pivotal time of a Jedi career, the Jedi were no longer peacekeepers but soldiers. She witnessed the same teachers who taught her that every life was precious stray from their teachings and become more jaded as the lines of peace and war blurred. And during her trial for a crime she didn't commit, she witnessed just how far the war had driven the Jedi from their original ideals. But was it the war that changed the Jedi? Or had the Order always been like this? It was this question that drove Ahsoka to ultimately leave the Order and begin discovering her own path. One where she could uphold the values that the Jedi taught her, while also committing to herself and her own beliefs. I now want to draw another more serious parallel to Ahsoka and most of her fans. If you were a kid or a teenager growing up in America in the early 2000s, you pretty much lived a realistic version of Ahsoka's life. Many 2000s kids remember being taught that America was the greatest country in the world, that God and America were synonymous, and any actions the government takes is for the best interest of the people. But then in 2001, our country was plunged into war. A war that as kids we were more likely accepting of because it was the righteous America going to punish the bad guys, or at least that's how it was sold to us. But as we grew up and witnessed the devastation, racism, and terror that the war brought, we began to have our own questions about the government and about the adults who supported them. Now, this isn't a political video about who is right or wrong. I'm simply just showing the parallels to real life that Star Wars often draws, but these parallels are usually overlooked because it's just a space odyssey. We love Ahsoka because Ahsoka is us. As a kid, you're pretty much required to subscribe to the same beliefs as your parents or other adults around you. And many of you, regardless of if you're American or not, have at some point had to reevaluate the way you've seen the world your entire life. And that's why so many people can connect with Ahsoka, because she had the courage to forge her own path regardless of her past. She has always been the character through which the audience was meant to view the Clone Wars. We fell in love with the clones because we saw their stories. Well, so did Ahsoka. We began to question the Jedi because we saw how their actions affected the people of the galaxy. And so did Ahsoka. We dreamed about becoming something that resembled what we loved about the Jedi without their glaring flaws. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's exactly what Ahsoka Tano did.